Well, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Master the NEC, where we talk about the National Electrical Code and all things electrically related. My name's Paul Abernathy, your host as always. Check us out over on www.masterthenec.com. All the courses we offer, we got something to help you learn the National Electrical Code much better. But thanks for taking the time out of your day to join me here on our podcast. Again, our podcasts are available on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, all of the, Spotify, that's where I listen to it. All of the popular podcast platforms, you can find our podcast by just searching for Master the NEC. Okay, 3 separate words, Master the NEC. And you can find us and subscribe to us and listen on all your favorite platforms. You can also listen from our website because we have a special feature and it's browser-based. So you can listen to everything there if you want as well, straight from your device, Apple, Androids, whatever you want. Tablets, it doesn't matter. But you can also listen over on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Master the NEC. Be sure to subscribe, share it with your friends. If you want to join our private community over on the YouTube channel, there's a join button there. It's a small monthly commitment to get access to private exclusive information. And we have a lot more coming there because we're going to take all of our live shows that we do on Wednesday nights and actually move them over to the paid platform. So if you're interested in staying up with us on that, you want to go over there and join that. And again, exclusive, you can ask all your questions. We'll have training sessions on all things, not just exam prep, but literally everything, kind of like what we're doing today. And we're going to talk about a specific area of the residential code today. But again, there's going to be some great stuff available over there for all you subscribers. So go over there and give it a look. We appreciate everybody that supports us through that platform. All right, so today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about 2 receptacle placement requirements in the National Electrical Code that, again, should be pretty straightforward, but again, does cause some confusion. So we want to make sure that we address them and make it as clear as possible when it comes to the application of the National Electrical Code when it comes to receptacle placement in hallways under 210.52H and foyers 210.52I. Now, hallways is pretty straightforward. I think most people understand the hallway, but in our Fast Tracks program, we routinely will have a question that deals with hallways and foyers, and a percentage of the students have trouble with it. They seem to struggle with what the threshold is for dealing with receptacle placements. Now, remember, we're not talking about the requirements for branch circuits here, okay? Because these hallways and these foyer receptacles that are required in there, they are able to be supplied from other branch circuits in the dwelling, okay? This isn't not about dedicated circuits just for a foyer or just for a hallway. Now, the actual use of these receptacles in these areas are probably very limited. Okay, because it is hallways, it is foyers, probably going to be used for things like vacuum cleaners and maybe a lamp if your foyer is of any adequate size. And so that's really what these are going to be about. But the code requires them, and there's a minimum requirement, which is what the National Electrical Code is. It's a minimum requirement. You always have the option to go above and beyond the minimums if you wish. But again, a lot of people produce things to the minimum standard. And then, of course, if somebody wants more receptacles and things like that, then again, it just costs more money because it does take more labor. It does take more material. So, again, you should be compensated for that. So, always advocate for good communication with people during the design process or walking through dwellings with your homeowner or designer or builder, and make sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to placement and everything like that. Okay, just going to get rid of some headaches that you might have later on if you don't kind of square that stuff up right away. All right, so we're going to look at 210.52H hallways. And I should remind you, I am in the 2020 edition of the National Electrical Code, but I will tell you that nothing changed from the 2017 to the 2020 edition. So for all of you out, and when it comes to hallways and foyers, that is. So for those that are out there listening and you're in the 2017 code, or you're just getting ready to migrate to the 2017 code, or you're going from the 2017 to the 2020, there's no change here. So you can listen today using your 2017 code book or 2020 code book. It doesn't really matter. If you're around the job site with a bunch of your guys and you're kind of bringing them together, we have a lot of people that listen to our podcast at their morning meeting. and they get kind of their code tip of the day rather than having to come up with their self, they'll listen to this podcast, and I think that's a great thing, and I get a lot of emails from people that do that. So again, kudos to you for at least wanting to educate your people. That's the key to everything is education. All right, so let's look at 210.52H for hallways. Now, we're talking about dwelling unit hallways because, again, hallways in a commercial building, there's no requirements for receptacles generally in placement anyway. You can put them wherever the engineer wants them. But when it comes to dwelling units, we're going to have a lot of requirements in 210.52 that are requirements that we have to do. We have to meet it as a minimum, okay, minimum standard. And so 210.52H is no different. But here's how it reads. It says in dwelling units, so we're very clear this is a dwelling unit requirement. And also I should quantify something. When you see dwelling unit, this does not just mean single-family dwelling. It also means the individual dwelling units of a multifamily dwelling. Okay, so when you see the term dwelling unit or dwelling units, it is applying to single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, but it's not applying to the commercial hallways of a commercial building that might have individual dwelling units within it, like an apartment complex, things like that. You with me? So this is very much driven to the dwelling unit, and that's why it's written this way. Some people would say, why don't they say in single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, and individual dwelling units of a multifamily? Because they don't really need to. This applies to all dwelling units across the scope. Okay. Now, here's what it says. It says hallways of 10 feet or more in length shall have at least one receptacle outlet. Okay, so the first thing that we can quantify here is that if the hallway is 9 feet in length, then it's not going to require a receptacle outlet, right? If it is 10 foot or more in length, it's going to require at least one. If the hallway is 50 feet long, and that's a very big dwelling unit, by the way, but again, might as well go to extreme. If it was 50 feet long, it would still only require one receptacle outlet. And of course, remember the outlet is the box, the receptacle is the device that goes in the outlet, okay? All right, so the next thing we need to know is, okay, how do we measure this 10 foot? What breaks this measurement? Does, like when we're doing 6 foot, 12 foot for receptacle layouts in 210.52A in a dwelling unit, we know that hallways, door openings, things like that will break our measurement. Okay, when we're measuring along the floor line, 6 feet from a door opening, and then the next one can be at 12 feet away so that no point along the wall line is more than 6 feet from a receptacle. We get that. But this one, how does it differ in the measurement style? Well, that's when we get into the second part here, and it says, as used in this subsection, okay, so we're talking about subsection H, hallways. It says the hallway length shall be considered the length along the center line of the hallway without passing through a doorway. Now, to me, you can go to Webster's and you can look up doorway, and it has some kind of relationship with a door that you can actually close off that portion of the hallway. Okay, so if I'm measuring from one doorway and I go down the center of the hallway and I get to another doorway with a door that can actually segregate that hallway and close it off, then that ends my measurement. So if that hallway between doorway to doorway is 10 feet, then I have to have at least one, and I can put it wherever I want in that hallway. Okay, wherever it's most convenient. Obviously, we want to be, have a lot of thought about placement. You don't want to stick it in the corner. Okay. Put it where it's going to be pretty central. At your choice. You're the designer. You get to design that. But we have to have one in there. Now, that can be fed from any other general purpose branch circuit that's in that dwelling. It's not going to be an issue. It's going to be used very minimally, probably just for vacuum cleaners or something like that. Or, for our case, probably a little night light or air freshener, something like that. But reality is, this is a receptacle placement requirement. Now, what's important to realize is that if I have a hallway that turns a right angle, that the process of measuring down the center line would mean that I measure down the center to the center part of that right angle, and then I turn and I measure down the center part and continue on down past that right angle. So I'm measuring all the way down the center line, and again, the measurement of 10 feet continues. So it could be, I could go 6 feet down, 6 feet 6 inches down one hall, and then it turns 90 degrees, and then it goes another 3 foot 6 inches. Well, that's 10 feet. I'm going to have a receptacle in that hallway. Okay. The only thing that breaks this center line measurement is when I go through a doorway. Okay. And we're not talking about a deviation in the hall, maybe an architectural deviation. We're talking a doorway, the ability to close off or segregate that hallway from another hallway. Okay. And that's going to make a difference because then you're going to treat the other hallway as a new hallway. But again, we're sticking to the hallway model. So you're going to measure down the center line. And if it turns to the left or turns to the right, you just simply make that turn with it and continue your measurement all the way down the center line until you get to the doorway. And that's where your measurement stops. Okay. So that's how we do it. So again, if I have a hallway that's only 8 feet, not requiring a receptacle, although prudence sometimes in my design, I probably put one there. Again, it doesn't cost all that much. And I probably walked with the customer during the layouts and they probably wanted one. So again, I'm going to give them one. I'm not giving it for free, but I'm going to give them one. But if it is a 11-foot hallway, then I'm required to have one in there. And I'm going to look for a central location that's going to allow it to be actually utilized. I wouldn't be let's say I had a 10-foot hallway, but then it turned right angles and went 3 feet. I'm not going to put it in that last 3 feet. Okay, I'm going to come back and try to get it centralized because that's overall 13 feet. I'm going to try to get it somewhere centralized, okay, so it can be utilized adequately at both ends. That's just me. But again, nothing would say you couldn't. Again, put it in there. There's no placement requirement on where you have to have it. We have no 6-foot, 12-foot rule. We have none of that in there. You put it where you want, okay? So within reason, obviously, we have to remember the general rules is you're not going to put that receptacle and you're going to have it more than 5.5 feet above the floor because obviously it should be a common sense thing. But we'll say that after November 3rd, I'm not sure how much common sense is out anymore. But you know what? I'm not going to get political. So there we go. All right, so that's your hallway. Now, let's look at 210.52i. This is dealing with the foyer. Now, what is a foyer? Now, the first thing we would tend to do is say, okay, a foyer is probably somewhere we enter into the main dwelling unit, and we enter into a foyer. And it's an area that's probably going to have hallways that branch off of it to go to other areas of the dwelling. Okay? Makes sense. And we're thinking, okay, that's what we're dealing with. We have some kind of understanding. Now, a couple of cycles ago, I can't remember exactly when, that foyer came in. It was a result of the fact that you had this anteroom that you would enter into, and you would have other rooms that kind of branch off of it, or hallways that branch off of it that truly are hallways. They're transitions between one room to another room type of scenario. And so we needed to know, what was this room? Now, this wasn't a room like a living room. It wasn't like a bedroom. It's not one of those similar rooms that are going to be covered in 210.52a. What was it? And what we did know is that we needed to have more receptacles in there because people weren't putting any receptacles in there. So people would put lamps in there and entryways, and it's a transition. Maybe you have stairs that go upstairs or downstairs and a hallway, or maybe a den. And you had this gathering of an entry space, and we didn't know what to do with it. So we call it a foyer. And if you look up a definition of foyer in the Merriam-Webster, okay, it is telling us that it is an anteroom or an area that's an entrance area. It's kind of like a hallway, but like a vestibule. But an anteroom is a small outer room that leads to another room, okay? Or it's often used as a waiting area. So that is probably the best, and it would be nice in our definitions to have foyers and in parentheses, anteroom, because I feel that's a better description of what we're working with. Although I have not submitted a public input for that, I don't feel like having to justify that. But anyway, you get our point, and I think we get it. Now, the good news is in 210.52i, we do have a square footage requirement to kick in for these receptacles that we now need in this foyer if it qualifies as a foyer. Now, a lot of times you might come straight into a dwelling, for example, and whether it's a single family, multifamily, two family dwelling, whatever it is, you come into the dwelling unit, let's say, and when you enter into it, it is very much just a hallway, right? So then you're going to use 210.52H. It's a hallway, and you very much use that guide. Okay, that's your guide. And again, remember that we're in 210.52. So when people say, well, what about other foyers? Again, 210.52 is dwelling unit receptacle outlets. Don't lose sight where we're at. Stay focused. We're talking about dwellings now. Just because you didn't see any wording that said in dwelling units, we are still very much talking about dwelling units. Okay, keep the focus. Keep the focus. It's not just me that has ADD. I promise you, there's a lot of people out there that do. Okay, so let's read what it says about foyers. And then we can determine whether or not this foyer is not a hallway and it is truly a foyer so that we know how to address this for the receptacle placement. It says, per the National Electrical Code, it says foyers that are not part of a hallway in accordance with 210.52H, which we just looked at, and that have an area that is greater than 60 square feet shall have a receptacle located in each wall space 3 feet or more in width. Okay, now before I finish this, let's talk about something. You could have an area that you enter into that is simply just a hallway. My house, you enter into it, it's just a hallway, right? It is not a foyer. In fact, in my house, you come straight into it. Next thing, you're right in the dining room area. Okay, it's just kind of how it opens up. So you have to determine whether or not you actually have a foyer or you actually have really just an entry that is going into a hallway. Okay. And of course, the one key thing is, even if you classify it as a hallway, then again, it's pretty easy. You go to 210.52H and you start doing the measuring from that doorway that you come into and you start measuring. And you can determine if you need a receptacle in there or not. Now, in my case, it opens up into another room. Once it opens up into another room, you have to create this imaginary line of demarcation between the entry hallway and the actual room itself. And then, of course, your room spacing requirement kicks in, and you just follow your normal requirements of 210.52A. Okay, so you know that's why we get the big bucks. We have to make that decision, that determination. The code is just guidance. Again, it's not going to take the place of common sense. People like to think it would, but that's not its purpose. It's a minimum standard, and again, that's why you're skilled. You have to make these decisions. So if you determine that it is not a hallway, you're entering into a foyer, which again, you can look up the definition of an anteroom, and we qualify that, and we say, okay, what's the next thing? It's not a hallway. Is the area of this space greater than 60 square feet? It has to be greater than 60, not just 60. Another mistake people make. It says greater than 60. So, 60 and 1 inch, 60 and half an inch, whatever. It's got to be greater than 60 square feet. I keep saying inching, but you know what I mean. It's got square footage wise. I don't know why I said inches. It's got to be greater than 60 square feet. So 60 and a half, 60 and a quarter, I don't know. But once it gets greater than 60 square feet, then the receptacle requirement kicks in and says, all right, any wall space that is 3 feet or more in width is going to require a receptacle. Now, that doesn't matter whether the wall space is 3 feet or 8 feet or 6 feet or 10 feet, one receptacle in that space. Now, what if I have multiple spaces that are separated by doorways and things like that? Then you treat each space separately in the foyer. And any of those spaces that are 3 feet or more in width is going to require a receptacle. Now, where you put it on the wall is totally up to you. How you want to put it closer to the left, to the right, in the center for pretty looks and whatever, that's up to you. Now, what gives us this rule to tell us this as far as this breaking up of spaces? The very last line says, doorways, door side windows that extend to the floor, and similar openings shall not be considered wall space. Okay, so any doorway that's going to break that wall space, just like when we're doing the 6 and 12 foot, the floor line, and you have a doorway, it breaks the measurement. Okay, it ends your measuring process. Same thing here. So you could have a foyer that has other rooms that branch off of it. Then you're only going to measure the wall space between the doorway where you entered into the foyer, along the wall, to that doorway that maybe enters into a den, and that breaks your wall space. So now what is the width of that physical wall space? If it's 3 feet or more, then I got to put a receptacle there. Then you go to the other side of that den's doorway and start your measurement again. If I have a wall space there that's only 2 feet and then it has a hallway that enters further into the dwelling, then that 2 feet's not going to require me to put a receptacle there because it's not 3 feet or more. Then I go to the other side of that hallway opening and I start my measurement again. Maybe I'm in this foyer and now I've got an 8-foot wall space. Then guess what? You're going to have at least one receptacle in that wall space because it is 3 feet or more in width. Okay. And again, any opening in that space, any doorways, any door side windows that extend to the floor or similar openings. Okay. And when we say similar openings, that's kind of a catch-all because you could have those openings that are not doorways. They're just transitions from one room to another that don't have doors on it. We don't have that same rule in the hallway. Remember how it reads? But in this case, similar openings can be other openings that are going to break the floor line as you're measuring around the wall. At that point, you have to use that kind of judgment to determine, does this actually break my measurement? Okay. So sometimes I've seen bigger foyers that have fireplaces and things like that. And of course, that's a similar opening that's going to break the floor line. And you're going to only measure the wall space that doesn't have a break. Okay. So again, that's how you do the foyer. That's going to require you. So let's say I had we have a foyer that I come into your dwelling, and I have a room to the left, room to the right, or maybe a stairway to the right. And I've got wall spaces, and I've got 4 wall spaces in there that are 3 feet or more in width. And I'm not counting the space that's the doorways to the hallway, or the doorway to the den and things like that. Then I've got to have 4 receptacles in there. And that's significant. Now, these receptacles are not required to be any individual brand circuit to them. They can be off of the general lighting or whatnot. It doesn't really matter. But they have to be installed. So this is very much a receptacle outlet requirement and not so much requiring any type of dedicated or individual brand circuit to them. They can be supplied by the general purpose circuits, brand circuits, and that's perfectly fine. This is about making sure the receptacle outlets are actually there, not about what supplies power to them. Okay. All right. So that's an important thing to remember. So we're just trying to determine where we need to put them in the number. Okay. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in today's episode. Hopefully you got something out of it. Again, we'll be doing a lot of these little shorter ones under 30 minutes that kind of dabble in it. You know me, I can't do 10-minute stuff. I can't even do 1-minute stuff. I got too much stuff to get out. But hopefully you understand how to do that measurement, and it makes it a little easier, and the nuances of the code language kind of sometimes can make it difficult. But again, we make it simple and easy for you to apply. Until next time, folks, stay safe, take care, God bless.